Our scripture reading this morning is going to be from the book of Daniel, the first 20 verses of chapter 1. And as you turn there, I don't typically do this for myself, but I'm going to ask for some prayers for me as well. The last week and a half I've been having problems eating again, so I'm going to go in tomorrow and get it checked out. So if you see me drinking my shake up here, I apologize, but you probably wouldn't like it anyways. If you do, I have a couple downstairs. So I appreciate your support and prayers through that as well. Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 20. It was in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia, and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. Young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and the wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel, but the official told Daniel, "I am afraid of my lord, the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you." Daniel then said to the guard whom the chief official had appointed over them, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed to do this, and he tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink, and he gave them vegetables instead. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered into the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all of the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Today's message is about change. And how do we handle change? And I wanted to begin with this illustration. This guy is going to have like a 3.5-minute talk. This will be on the screen. And I thought it was good to start us off in thinking about how do we handle change? And what does change do to the average person? And things like that. So listen to this illustration, please.
We hear something a lot about change, and that is that people don't change because they're too lazy. I want to go back for the lazy people for a second, because I think that what looks like laziness is often exhaustion. Let me tell you about a fascinating study in psychology. So picture the scene. Some students come into a lab. It smells amazing. Somebody's just baked fresh chocolate chip cookies. And in front of them is a table, and on the table are 2 bowls. And one of the bowls has the fresh baked chocolate chip cookies. The other bowl has a bunch of radishes. Now, some of the students are asked to eat a couple of the cookies, but to leave the radishes alone. Another group of students is asked to eat several of the radishes, but to leave the cookies alone. Now, while these radish eaters are sitting there nibbling on this rabbit food, the researchers go out of the lab. They're trying to induce temptation. They're trying to see, will these radish eaters sneak a cookie? It's kind of sadistic when you think about it. But the radish eaters are strong. They resist the cookies. Not a single one of them sneaks one. And meanwhile, as you can imagine, the cookie eaters don't experience the same kind of temptation to binge on the radishes. So, study appears to be over. And then both groups are asked to go on to a second step that doesn't appear to be related. It looks like a kind of logic puzzle, where they're asked to trace out a complicated geometric shape without raising their pencil above the paper. Unbeknownst to them, this task was designed to be impossible. Can't be done. The researchers simply wanted to see how long they would persist in a difficult task. Well, so the cookie eaters, they try, and they try, and they try, and they go on for an average of 19 minutes trying to solve this impossible puzzle. The radish eaters, they last on average 8 minutes. Why this huge gap? Well, the answer may surprise you. The radish eaters ran out of self-control. After they were reining themselves in, resisting those cookies, they didn't have enough energy left to rein themselves in to keep doing a frustrating task. And this is something that psychologists have proven again and again. Self-control, in the broad sense of the term, meaning any time we're really monitoring our own behavior carefully, is exhaustible. That helps to explain some common things we all experience, like when we're at work, it's been a really hard day, and when we come home, we're more likely to snap at our partners, or to eat more than we should. Now, here's why all of this matters for change situations. Because in almost every change situation, what we're doing is we're substituting new, unfamiliar behaviors for behaviors that are older and more comfortable. And that burns self-control. So think of your morning routine, for instance. You have a way, a system for showering and brushing your teeth, and you've been doing it for so long it's unconscious, it's effortless. What if you wanted to redesign the whole thing from top to bottom? You could do it, but it would take tremendous self-control. You'd have to monitor yourself every second of the morning, and by the time you got to work, you'd be mentally exhausted. What looks like laziness is often exhaustion. Change simply wears people out. Even well-intentioned people will simply run out of self-control after a while. To learn more,
you ever feel stressed out in life when there's change that's taking place? It can really be a burden on many. And I'm not picking on older people, but I can imagine that when I get to 70 and 80 years old, things that change, the world around us that changes, probably can become very frustrating, right? The different things that you see, it puzzles. Even at 40 years of age, things change in this world, becomes stressful to me. There are some other things that really stress me out, and that's watching and listening to some people. You ever listen to what people have to say, or say things that are strange yourself? These are some sayings that I hear at times that really stress me out. The saying, "I've got cold feet." You know, when you're going, maybe a couple getting ready to get married, and one person wants to back out and maybe not get married or something like that. Or maybe they were going to start doing something new, they get cold feet. That saying bothers me because I'm thinking, cold feet, if you got cold feet, put some socks on, right? It's just one of those odd sayings that we have. What about, "You're the apple of my eye"? Now listen, when I look at my wife, I wouldn't look at her and say she's the apple of my eye. I don't like fruit. We've established that. She would be more like the pizza of my eye, or now the protein shake of my eye. The apple of my eye is just one of those things. What about something expression you've all probably used last night or tonight or this morning. It's raining cats and dogs. Kids, did you see any cats and dogs falling from the sky today? No, I didn't. What about the saying, it's a rule of thumb? Like the rule of thumb. That doesn't make any sense. Unless you're measuring things by your thumb, you know, that might be a rule in life, but the rule of thumb, the thumb has no rules that I'm aware of. Or what about the proof is in the pudding? You ever hear anybody say that? The proof is in the pudding. Have you ever gone through a bowl of pudding and seen any proof in there? Now, think about that. There is no proof in the pudding. And then there's another saying that you hear with a bunch of different endings. There's two kinds of people in this world. People who like coffee and people who don't like coffee. People who like pizza and those who don't like pizza. People who like this or don't like that. You've heard that used, right? That phrase, there are two kinds of people. Well, there are also two kinds of people who like change and those people who don't. Most people that I know do not like change. I mean, I would think that if I took a poll of you, maybe 80% probably don't care for change. There are some of us who like change in certain situations. I enjoy change, like when it comes to furniture in my house or my office. I have to have it moved every once in a while. And if I had my way, it could be every other week. You know, I would move, but we don't have all that much room. I don't mind change when it comes to moving. No, I'm not moving. I'm just, like, I went to the Navy and I didn't mind going from one place to another. I kind of looked forward to a new adventure. I really didn't mind change, even though it was a little scary when it comes to switching jobs. But even with that, I do recognize that people don't like change. Isaac Newton had this one law of motion that says that everything continues in a state of rest unless some sort of a force of change is impressed upon it. See, everyone in this room has either experienced change, you're experiencing change now, or you will experience change at some point in your life. See, when things like a change of your career, perhaps a change of position is within your job, a marriage or a divorce, a birth of a child can produce change, right, Southern family? It can really change things altogether. An illness, a deployment or a redeployment, different things happen and it produces change. But the one thing is certain about everything in life, change will happen. So my question this morning is, how do we deal with change? The gentleman who did this video made a really good point. It makes some sense if you think about it. You go to work and you go through your routine of life, and a lot of us when we get home, we kind of get into that comfort zone, or we're exhausted from the day's work, and we become grouchier with our spouses or with our family. I mean, we've all kind of experienced that at times, right? Or we go through something in life and there's so much stress going on, and we soaked it up that when we're squeezed out, like I was showing the kids with the sponges, we just let the cares of this world or the other things come out. Well, how do we change with change? Or how do we deal with change? This story from the book of Daniel is a story about these young men, especially Daniel, who were brought into captivity. See, in 605 BC, Israel, the nation of Israel, was invaded by Babylon. And King Nebuchadnezzar came in, and not only did they invade and they besieged this country, but they took men into their possession and they were going to try to change these men. They were trying to change future generations by the way that they indoctrinated them, with teachings, with how they ate, with how they were raised. Listen to this verse one more time. Where was it? Help if I was back in the right chapter. It says that they were young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. It's like me. Okay, a couple of years ago later. They took what they thought were the best of the best, and they started to indoctrinate them. And Daniel and his friends, and I'm going to call them by easier names than I remember them by, the names that they were given by the king, which were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so if you hear me saying it's the same three that are also mentioned prior. But they're captured, and now they're living into a new way of living, a new society. And this had to be hard on them. Because not only did Babylon come in and invade their country, but they invaded the temple. Now listen, they grew up, these Jewish men grew up with this teaching of faith, this focus on worship, this focus on the importance of the temple. And they invaded the temple. And as you read it, they took some of the things out of the temple and they moved them into their way of living and used them for ways of pagan worship. That had to be offensive to them. It had to be a scary situation. But as we look, I want you to notice some of the things that Daniel and his friends did that we can do as well when we're trying to handle change. The first one is that we need to look to God. Sometimes we are so focused on ourselves, we're so focused on the change at hand, that we forget to stop and look up. Or stop and think about, where is God in this situation? We could be going along life's way and lose a job. And we first start thinking about what? I've been there. Well, how are we going to make ends meet? House payments, car payments. Am I going to be able to find a new job? We start to worry about all those things instead of first turning our attention to God. This is important because we need to know that God is in control. Even in Daniel's situation, if you look at verse 2 of chapter 1, it says, the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, into his hand. The Lord had something to do with this. Even though it wasn't the ideal situation, this was something that God was still in control of. It was allowed to happen. Could God at any time stop these things? Absolutely. But it continued to happen. He's in control. Remember that God is always with you in situations of change. What is the one verse that a lot of people hold on to? I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, plans to not harm you. That's a theme verse for many people. And that should be our thing too. We should know God is always with us. New Testament says, I will never leave you or forsake you. These are important promises. Sometimes when we think, oh, I might have to move, or in the military you might be deployed, or perhaps a marriage situation is falling apart, or separation, whatever it may be, we need to know that God's in control and that He's always going to be with us. And He is in charge. See, even though Nebuchadnezzar thought he was in charge and he tried to indoctrinate these men and even change their names, God said, no, I'm still in charge. He put into the mind of these men to not go through with this lifestyle of eating vegetable or of eating the meat and all the pagan foods and wine. And he came to Daniel, and Daniel came to the king and he said, please let me go and let me and my friends just eat vegetables. Crazy guy. You know, think about that. But he says, let us eat what we're used to eating, and then test the Lord and see if we are not in better condition and still in condition to learn. He knew that God was in charge, even though there was a change going about in his life. Even though his name was changed. I've shared this story many times, and perhaps here, about the story of Alexander the Great. And remember how he was in charge of all these nations, and he had one soldier who ran away from battle. If you ever remember this story, this soldier ran away and he was brought before Alexander the Great, and he was charged with fleeing. And you don't do that. You don't do that with Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great looked at the man and he says, son, tell me your name. And the story goes that he started off and he goes, my name is Alexander. He goes, I don't think I heard you. Tell me, what is your name? And the young man, he looked up and he said, sir, my name is Alexander. And the king looked at him, and he looked at him once again. He looked him in the eyes and said, sir, young man, tell me your name. The kid got so frustrated that he yelled, sir, my name is Alexander. And Alexander the Great looked at him in his eyes and he said, then you either need to change your name. Think about that. Either change your name or change your conduct. See, if you're Alexander the Great and you look at a man that's probably named after you in a way, Alexander, you don't want him to be the one fleeing. What is your Christian name? What is the name God calls you by? He's saying, hey, we either need to change our conduct or change our name. He wants all of us to know He's in charge, no matter what, in times of change. Secondly, we need to stay faithful. There's a man who fell off a cliff, but on his way down he happened to grab a tree limb. And the following conversation ensued. He goes, is anyone up there? I'm here, I am the Lord. Do you believe me? A voice came out of the clouds. Yes, Lord, I believe. I really believe. But I can't hang on much longer. Well, that's all right. If you really believe, you have nothing to worry about. I will save you. Just let go of the branch. The man thought for a moment and he says, is anyone else up there? Maybe his trust in God wasn't where it should be. Maybe he didn't remain faithful. Hi. Oh, guess it's time for me to be quiet again. Hey, Willow. Oh, she's going on. I'm here. You can take this. Next week, everybody's going to bring pacifiers for me. Sorry, stay faithful. Why is it important to stay faithful to God even in changes of our life? It pleases God. God says, you know what, no matter what you endure, what changes are going to happen, if you remain faithful to me, I'm going to be pleased. We should always trust and obey. When we experience change, whether it be a physical change, whether it be a change in career or a change in health, and we please God, we need to remember that we can also not please God. Some people give in to temptations. Some think, hey, I can take another drink, or I can cheat on my partner, or we compromise our relationship with God. Daniel could have cheated. Daniel could have not trusted God's way, and he could have said, okay, I'll eat the meat and drink the wine. Probably what I would have done. I'm going to be quite honest with you. I would have thought, I'm going to follow the rules or I might be put to death. Think about that. I was captured, and I'm going to follow the rules of men. But they stayed faithful. Daniel went, he asked only to eat vegetables, and it worked. Third and lastly, always look to the future. See, Daniel, through this whole picture, knew that God would deliver them. I said just a moment ago, God has a plan for each of us. Sometimes we don't see that plan because we only have mirror goggles on. Does that make sense? You ever have glasses that, remember when we were kids, we had these spy glasses, and out of the sides you could see like what's going on behind you? I thought of these things called mirror goggles. All we see is ourselves. We have these goggles on with mirrors, and we keep looking back at us. We keep looking at our problems, and we don't realize that God has a plan. He wants us to be able to be prepared for the future. God says it is God who began a good work in you, and He will carry it on into completion until the days of Christ Jesus. These men, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were in captivity for 3 years. Listen, after day one, most of us give up. We say, okay, God, maybe you're not going to deliver us. Maybe you're not going to help us through this change. We give up on these things instead of going, it's going to be okay. I've shared this story before. I don't think I ever shared it here, though. When Jackie and I, when we lived in Maumee, I was a youth pastor in Maumee for, 6 months? It seemed like it lasted. When I was told that wasn't going to work out, and I was going to have to find another job, I panicked. I was raised Grace Brethren, that's a denomination. I was raised that way. I wanted to be a pastor in the Grace Brethren Church. I wanted to be amongst my peers that I grew up with, in the denomination I grew up with. It was scary. I didn't know what was going to happen. I couldn't find a job. I got interviews, and some of them worked out, but some of them were, I don't want to go to Pennsylvania and live near Pittsburgh. That's for any Pittsburgh Steelers fans out there. I don't want to live anywhere near Pittsburgh. The Browns are all that there is in America, right? That's all that's good about life. I didn't want to go there. that was an option. I didn't know. We had a baby on the way. Okay? I had health insurance that we needed to continue. We had a 1-year lease on an apartment. We just bought a car, a new car, a Honda, which I still have out there. Maybe they'll pay me if I tell you Hondas are good vehicles too. But change was happening, and I was scared. I didn't want to continue to look toward the future because I was looking at what was going on now. And along came an opportunity in the United Church of Christ. Now, folks, you got to understand that while this is not like being taken captive in another type of a country, if you were raised Grace Brethren, very conservative, very to the letter of everything, and then the United Church of Christ had an opening. Now, if you don't know the United Church of Christ history very well, we range from everywhere very conservative to very liberal, and in between, and mainly liberal. And I'm not necessarily talking politics, I'm just talking about, in general, the whole thing. The United Church of Christ, the first thing I read about them was not very appetizing to a Grace Brethren person on their website. But I'm like, I'm still going to find out about this, because it was in Oak Harbor, Ohio. Like, I wouldn't have to move very far. So I got a hold of this church, I met with the pastor, we had lunch at Applebee's, or Chili's, it was Chili's, I'm sorry, I don't want to lie. Wow. I found a church. It worked out the way God wanted it to work out. Not the way I was thinking, not the way I had planned, but the way God wanted it to work out. I had a mentor there at that church that helped teach me, that helped grow me. Still down there in Oak Harbor, but, you know. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here. Some of you are going, oh, we wish it weren't for him. Think about that. One day I'm sitting there going, I'm only going to do this, and this is the way I was raised, and this is where I'm going to go. And I'm here. Got to meet new people. We see tons of children coming most weeks. We have a lot of fun here. I didn't see the future. Had I seen it, I wouldn't have believed it probably. But it was good. God can do exceedingly abundantly more than we can ever ask or imagine. He did so in the lives of these Israelites. If you look at the very end, the king came. They were brought before the king, and he found none equal to Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and they entered into the king's service. Can you imagine working for the king? Can you imagine working for the king? I got to work for an 06 captain of the United States Navy in Washington, D.C. That was like working for the king in a way. That was cool. But think about working for the king. Think about working for the, okay, I'm going to say president. The job president, not maybe who you like or don't like. But think about being able to work there. But guess what? You are working for the king. You're working for the King of Kings. That is God's calling for us. Even in change, he said, look to the future because you are my instrument to do my will. God has a plan for you. The plan to prosper you, not to harm you. A plan that he will bless. Listen, God doesn't have plans that are mistakes. That's not who God is. He can't have that. So we need to always remember, look to God. Always stay faithful to him, no matter what. Look to the future. Could Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego ever imagine the blessing in store for them? No. Could I have ever imagined the blessing that I have today here in Elliston? Get to go downstairs and smell chicken? No. Can you imagine what blessings in store for you? Listen, some of you are saying, I'm 90. Who's 95? Anybody 95 yet? Nick, no. Some of you are saying, I'm in my 90s or my 80s. God can't have much more in store for me. Yes, he does. He has a kingdom. Eternity in store for you. Stay faithful. Continue to look to him. Look towards that future. If you think there's nothing else in front of you, look towards eternity with Christ. Listen, anybody go to Chris Tomlin concert last night? I didn't get to go. I know a few of you got to go. Anybody in here? I know downstairs. They had worship night in America in Toledo, and I heard phenomenal things about that. It's going to be worship night forever in heaven. It's going to be a wonderful experience. Some of you are saying, hey, I'm only 12, 13, or 14 years of age. Guess what? You got a lot of change coming your way. Some of you are just starting your careers. You have a lot of change. Through it all, always look to God. Ask God, what do you have in store for me? Believe in Him. Trust Him. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all of the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Those who remain faithful, those who remain focused on God, are going to receive wealth 10 times greater. And I don't mean money. I don't mean the money. Could be, wish. But a spiritual wealth. Praise God for that. Let's close in prayer. God, I pray for all who are in the middle of changes in their life. Some who are still dealing with recent situations of change, and some who don't even know what's about to hit them. No matter where we are in this journey of life, I pray that you would